And welcome back in. It is, of course, still enrolled a Big Ten football podcast. Ryan Hickey alongside Brian Tripp. Let's take a deep dive here into this big non-conference matchup. Alabama coming to Madison to get a breakdown here, talk about Wisconsin's offense, talk about what they need to do in order to pull off a big-time upset. Let's welcome to the pod Colten Bartholomew. Does a great job covering Wisconsin for Badger Extra, also the Wisconsin State Journal. Colten, welcome on, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Of course. So it's been an interesting offensive performance so far from Wisconsin here the first 2 weeks. They're a massive underdog, about 17, 16 points, depending on where you look here. What, in your opinion, does Wisconsin have to do in this game if they want to pull off the upset?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to just boil it down to luck, but they got to get lucky. But let's just be real here. I mean, just if you just go matchup against matchup, they don't have the advantage in many places in this matchup against Alabama. So I think they've got to have some things break their way. You know, they're going to have to get some turnovers. They're going to have to get maybe a trick play or some type of explosive that wasn't, generated in a normal way. The one thing I would say is their special teams has been pretty improved over what we've seen in the last few years and even from last season when Fickell arrived. So maybe they got to make a big play in that way, set up a score or, prevent a score in some capacity there. But yeah, they've got to have something a little bit out of the normal, kind of tilt the game in their favor. Because, like I said, if you just go straight up possession, like go back and forth, it's not a good matchup for Wisconsin.
Ryan talked about the offense, and he mentioned explosive plays. I think everyone thought with Tyler Van Dyke, this is an offense that's going to continue to build on that air raid, try to stretch the field, create big plays. But they've been really good on third downs, but it's been efficiency so far, short yardage. It doesn't feel like what everyone thought the transition would be when Luke Fickell became head coach on the offensive side. Is it an anomaly so far, 2 games into the year? Where do you feel like the Wisconsin offense is trending? What's Luke Fickell's role with that Wisconsin offense?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think the first 2 weeks, and I'm not predicting that this is going to be a crazy explosive offense down the road, but I think the first 2 weeks they handcuffed themselves pretty hard in terms of what they were going to show. And, there's pluses and minuses to that. Obviously, you don't want to put everything on tape for some of your bigger games against Western Michigan, South Dakota in Wisconsin's case, but I think that they maybe hurt themselves in terms of the fan excitement and just the perception of this team by being so limited on offense and intentionally slowing things down like they did. So I think as they've seen how the reaction's been in the first 2 weeks, they might be a little bit regretful of how they handled the first 2. But I think in terms of just the direction of this offense, to me, the only reason you bring in a guy like Van Dyke is to push the ball down the field, right? He's an elite deep ball passer. He's a guy that generates those big plays with the longer throws. But if you're just going to ask him to do this, I don't know why you would invest your transfer resources in that way if that's the way you want to play. So I think we're going to see, starting with this Alabama game and then moving on to USC and some of the other big games on the schedule, you're going to see more downfield shots. You're going to see some things where maybe it's a 50-50 ball, but, you've got to at least try some of those. And Van Dyke said on Tuesday when we spoke to him, yeah, maybe you go 2 for 5 and it's not efficient at the end of the day when you look at it. But those two completions might be setting up a field goal or scoring a touchdown, whatever it is. So those have to be part of this offense. And that's something that I think is the focus going forward. In terms of Fickell's involvement, it is fairly, I would say 90% Phil Longo show. I think he says, a lot of the third, fourth down decisions. The emphasis the first 2 weeks, particularly getting the run game going and leaning on the offensive line. I think that's a lot of Fickell saying that has to be the foundation we lay. So I think there's a little bit of involvement there, but it is a lot of what Phil Longo wants to do.
Talking about that run game, is Walker going to be good to go? What's his status and what can he mean for the run game?
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a game-time decision. It sounded like he was close last week, and then they said, you know what, all right, let's hold back, and hopefully they can have him back for Alabama. So I think it's going to be a game-time decision, but I think things are fairly positive. So we'll see. I mean, they practice. They do like a walkthrough on Sundays, don't go on Monday, and then Tuesday, Wednesdays when they go really hard. So I haven't heard anything negative coming out of that, but I also haven't heard oh yeah, he was full go either way. So like I said, game time decision for Walker. And in terms of how that affects the game, honestly, yeah, he's going to help. There's no doubt he's a very talented player. I just think that they've got enough running back depth that even if he weren't to play, it probably wouldn't affect things too much. I really think this game comes down to how well Van Dyke can play and attack this Alabama defense because, even in that last week game with South Florida, Alabama's defense got off the field pretty quickly. They only let up one drive, really. But so I think it's really going to be about how Van Dyke can attack them and create some plays down the field, because I don't think you're going to win too often challenging Alabama's front seven in a running battle, even with Wisconsin's offensive line, which is pretty good.
Let's say, Colten, that like this is the game where they actually open up the offense, right? And the handcuffs are off and they actually try to kind of really lean into the Phil Longo offense. This game, but even like you said, looking ahead where you still play Penn State, you play Oregon, Iowa, Nebraska. There's some really tough games here on the schedule for Wisconsin coming up here. What's the ceiling for this offense? Like, how good can they be if now they're truly just full bore in the left lane of this air raid Phil Longo offense?
Yeah, I think that really is going to come down to some development from the receivers. Will Pauling in the slot's been the most dependable guy since Phil Longo and Luke Fickell got here, and I think he's a guy that you would expect in some of those big games to be a focal point, especially on third down. We've seen him to be really the go-to guy for multiple quarterbacks here in this offense. But I think you've got to see some steps forward from guys like Bryson Green, who was a transfer from Oklahoma State that they brought in. He's probably their best deep ball threat in terms of winning contested catches, being physical at that point of the catch. He's got to be a guy that they get the ball to, I think, a little bit more. That's one thing that I think has been a critique of the first 17 games here-ish of the Fickell era, was these outside receivers have really just been go deep and we'll try to get it to you maybe. Not as much, maybe some shorter routes and trust you with the ball after the catch. And a little bit of that is just maybe not getting the separation that they need to, but I think that the offense needs to do a better job of getting them chances as opposed to expecting only the deep passes to be their opportunities. So I think Bryson Green's a guy that's really got to step up. CJ Williams and Vinny Anthony have been kind of splitting the reps at the other outside receiver spot. Those are both guys that I think can do things with the ball after the catch, but I think are really going to be more, possession receivers and getting to the sticks and getting first downs and keeping the offense on the field. So like I said, for this offense to reach a ceiling, it's got to be the receivers stepping up and making some strides. But in terms of what it can be, like, there's no reason this shouldn't be a 30, 35-point game offense, in my opinion, with the talent they have and the quarterback they have, and then the faith that they have in their offensive line. It's just they've got to play with a little bit more pace. They intentionally slowed things down the first 2 weeks, and I think that's going to change on Saturday. And I think they've got to get these receivers some more chances as opposed to just expecting them to get down the field.
That would mean cashing in for a few more touchdowns too, instead
that would certainly help
of settling for field goals. Along those same lines, if an offense can get on track, look, you know what you're going to get when you're playing in Iowa, like Ryan mentioned, but it starts this week. Alabama, Oregon, Penn States of the world that are going to score 25, 30, 35, 40 points a game. What's the ceiling for the defense? How good is this defense this year? And can that be something they can fall back on in bigger matchups against great teams like they're going to face on Saturday?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be. I thought this defense had that ability talent-wise, especially what we saw from spring and training camp. But so far, the outside linebackers haven't been the disruptive players that they need them to be. You talk about guys like John Pius and Leon Lowry, two of their transfer additions that throughout the entire offseason were just wrecking shop during practice. And I thought they were going to come in and become national names in terms of edge guys on defense, and they've been kind of no-shows. So that's got to change for this defense to really step up and be impactful. I think their defensive line took a big hit in training camp when they lost James Thompson Jr., who's an experienced guy and probably their best defensive lineman. So they're really relying on a rotation there. I would say only one guy, Elijah Hills, has stepped up in that room so far. Mm-hmm. That's something that they've got to address because I'm not saying they need to be studs, that they don't need to be in the backfield all the time, but they got to do a better job holding their gaps and not getting stretched out like they've been the first couple of weeks. It's interesting because you don't think of Wisconsin as a defensive back place. It's mostly linebackers, kind of front seven guys, but really the secondary has been arguably the strength of the defense so far, with Hallman and Wohler back from last season after really good years. And then, Xavier Lucas on the other side, the guy that's really come on, Isaiah Forkreen as well. So I think this secondary's done a really good job. This is their biggest test by far. You could argue probably all season with the way that Milroe extends plays and loves throwing the ball down the field. So I'm excited to see what that looks like on Saturday. But for this defense to reach its ceiling, it's going to have to be the linebackers getting more pressure, getting in the backfield more often, and causing some negative plays that just haven't quite happened yet.
We were talking right before you hopped on about just the uniqueness of Alabama coming north to face a Big Ten team. We think it's great for college football. I'd love to see it more. Obviously, there's so many things that play a factor into why it doesn't happen in the decisions financially, what you're trying to do to make a 12-team playoff, or even a 14 playoff in the past. Are Crimson Tide fans already in Madison? And what's the uniqueness and hype surrounding this game in Madison and then the return trip the following year for the Badgers?
Yeah, I haven't seen them yet, but it is Thursday morning as we record here. I think that we'll start seeing them start trickling in this afternoon. It's exciting. I mean, there's no doubt. There's been more talk from the university side and just the community side of having this big game. Obviously, the Fox pregame show is going to be here as well, and I know people are excited about that. I think this is just one of those opportunities that if they had done better in the first couple of weeks and looked more exciting, I think fans would be a little bit more excited locally. I think there's a little bit of apprehension of getting too jacked up for this game because I think a lot of people are nervous about what the outcome might be. But in terms of just the uniqueness and having Alabama come to town, I mean, it's been almost 100 years. It's 1928 since the last time they played in Madison, at least. So to your point about seeing more of this, Alabama kind of started this trend 15 years ago under Saban of playing that early season game, but at a neutral site, like they played in Dallas so many times and stuff like that. So I hope this is a new trend. I hope when you're getting that 12-team playoff and that one loss might not hurt you, but it might save you from a bad conference loss, let's say, that can happen. I think this is hopefully going to be a trend toward getting more of these early season matchups that are cool. But yeah, it's something that I know Wisconsin's not taken lightly in terms of they get a chance against Alabama, and the town's trying to show out for it too.
What's an 11 a.m. kickoff like for those of us who haven't experienced an 11 a.m. kickoff? How early is that?
Well, selfishly, love it. Tons of time to write. Work is so much easier at 11 a.m. But, you know, not to disparage my state here, drinking in the morning is not that uncommon here for Badger fans. So it's just maybe brats in the morning are a little bit the out of the norm for 11 a.m. kicks. But yeah, it's honestly not that much different for Wisconsin. They've played a lot of them over the years because of just some of the maybe not great matchups here in the Big Ten West. So I think the thing about 11 a.m. kick is there's no chance to overthink, right? If you're a player, if you're a coach, you basically are waking up, getting breakfast in, maybe a little bit of a walkthrough at the hotel, and then you're getting on the bus and you're going to the stadium. So I know a lot of guys have said in the past, like, it's great because you can't get yourself too amped up, too psyched out because, you know, like I said, you wake up and it's basically go and get to the stadium. So that's kind of my read on what 11 a.m. kickoffs are like.
Yeah, cheese curds in the morning. I think it'll be a little different for Alabama fans than what they're used to, for sure, Colton. Last question.
The culture between these two fan bases is going to be very similar, and I think they're all going to love it.
Yeah, I agree.
You are right about that. Last question for me here. Just going back to the offense really fast here. We've seen, like you said, I know you're expecting a different or maybe a more aggressive and explosive offense here in this game. But going back to last year now so far through the first two games of this year, is there any feeling in the fan base of just like, hey, we were promised one thing. We were promised that the offense was going to be more modern and look like other college football teams that are explosive, gaining a lot of chunk yards, putting up a lot of points. Is there any feeling of like we were kind of sold one thing and are getting another by any chance?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think that goes back to what I was talking about with the receivers, that there needs to be a step up from that group and getting open. The quarterback's got to try to get those balls down the field more often because if you look at until last year in the bowl game when Tanner Mordecai really attacked deep and changed what his season-long stats looked like, his average depth of target was, I think, less than 10 yards, and that was the lowest in his career. So that's just not what you're expecting when you bring in an air raid offense. And Phil Longo's never been a true air raid. It's been a little bit different. He's been a guy that will run the ball with this system. The passing game obviously has its idiosyncrasies, but I think the biggest thing is if you're going to play this way and you're going to have this big culture shift in terms of an offensive philosophy, you've got to be able to get those explosive plays because if not, if you're going to be, kind of ball control and defense like they've shown, like I don't understand the recruiting philosophy of, all right, let's get more receivers to then run the ball. So I think there's a lot of people in the fan base that are kind of saying like, all right, if we're going to make this change, like we've got to start showing it because there's frustration in terms of we as a fan base have been watching one style of football be fairly successful, maybe never going to be national championship level. But now it's like, all right, cool. We're like the 25th best air raid offense in college football. Like, what's that doing for us? We might as well be the third best or second best pro style 2 tight end set. than what they're seeing right now. So I think there is definitely that feeling starting to grow in the fan base.